Hi, homeschooling families. This is Janet here at Cabinet Homeschool Resource Center, and I'm here with my friend Carol Gary.
Hello, Janet.
From the Balanced Homeschooler. And we have known each other, I'm thinking, since about 2014, more or less.
I think so. We were trying to do the math earlier. And
yeah.
I think that was the consensus.
yeah. Yeah. I think I met you when you were looking for a space that could host you for your Balanced Homeschooler workshops.
Yes, I do think that was the case. Yeah, it was becoming increasingly tough to find space to meet, and before we kind of went a little bit more to the virtual model of things, and voila, our paths crossed.
I know, and it's been so exciting because we have connected in different levels for different events and different activities. It's been really cool. So tell us a little bit about your homeschooling journey.
Oh, wow. We started homeschooling in 2000, so it's been 20 years. I was one of the weird ones who, was at the convention when our oldest was 2, and I was attending high school workshops. Like, is this a global thing? Can I be in this for the long term? Yeah. And so, I would be in there just kind of looking at what's ahead. And basically, my husband and I, we just actually last week celebrated our 29th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
And but we were older before we started having kids than the rest of our peers at the time. And so when we started having our first son, a lot of our friends had kids in first, second, third grade, and we were hearing all the stories about coming home with 3 hours of homework for a third grader, and I'm just kind of, that is just weird. And and I just remember having this random thought when our oldest was just a baby, like, I can't believe I'm gonna have to kind of give him over to somebody else in just a few years. And it was just kind of a random in and out thought. And when he turned 2, we had a friend who was very knowledgeable about all the school choice options, and charter schools were kind of a new thing at the time, and she knew we weren't really too keen on public school, and so she gave us all these resources, and I was like, I don't like this about that, and this, and I got to the end of it, and I was like, why don't I just do it myself? And I had no clue.
Have fun.
I knew it was legal, and that was about all I knew. I knew not one person in Arizona who homeschooled. I had a random cousin I barely knew in California who homeschooled, and it was not necessarily a positive experience over there. So I had no role model whatsoever. So and that is a little bit of the motivation behind why the Balanced Homeschooler was eventually born 10 years later. Because I wound up getting involved in a large ministry at our church. Used to have a large ministry ministering to hundreds of homeschooling families, and I noticed that there were just themes of questions that would come. And I know you get this, right? I'm preaching to the choir, because you get these themes of questions that are repeat, and you end up repeating yourself. And so we thought, well, we need something that kind of helps integrate new homeschoolers and helps them calm their concerns and the nerves on some of the standard questions that come up. Yeah. And so what started out as like a 10 bullet list grew to a 10-page thing, and then eventually it grew to a 550 page mentoring
It looks so
tool.
pretty now. You know what's funny of what you were just saying? Yeah. That I grew up in Peru, of course, and I shouldn't say of course, but most people know that. My little Yamaka here.
Yes, I incorrectly called them sheep.
They're not sheep. They're llamas in English, or llamas, better say. That's right. But my oldest one was also 2 years old, and I had the same experience. That I just thought, that's just what you do. You send your kids to school.
It's just the thing that you do. Yes,
that's right. Expected. And I did my senior year of high school here in the USA. The rest of my elementary and high school education was done in Peru, and the environment was so different. That I just couldn't believe. I was like, I want to send my kid to the school, and I was just kind of upset about it, but that's just what you do. And
it is. It's what you do, and like I said, at that time in Arizona, charter schools were kind of a new subject. And my friend, who was so kind and informative, she did not homeschool. She never homeschooled, but she was a model parent in every way. And I looked up to what choices she made with her kids, and she and her husband, they were the ones that were the advocates for the kids. I remember a story one time where he literally went at 3 a.m. and got in line to make sure that the daughter got the right teacher that year. So just all the things, all the PTA involvement and everything. So they did everything right, and their kids are awesome. I mean, it worked out great for them. But I learned kind of by accident that one way or another, parents must be 100% invested in their children's education. And one way or another, you're going to do that.
Exactly.
So you're either going to be jockeying for position for your kid and lobbying for this and you know, running interference on that and kind of undoing certain things later on. You're going to be spending energy that way.
Yes.
Or I kind of stumbled into realizing that, you know, I could spend my energy actually building rather than deconstructing and fixing. And it's not like the homeschool journey is perfect for everybody, but it's just, you do spend, it's a lot of energy that you put out, and it is exhausting at times, but you're doing things that are in general moving the trend in an upwardly positive direction versus constantly feeling like you're in the hills and valleys. So yeah, that's kind of what prompted us. And then again, about 10 years into just serving in ministry and serving families and getting a lot of the same questions, I realized, and I did actually look to many other resources. It's not like I set out to say, I'm going to go write a book. There are many good resources out there, but I found that they were limited. I found that they were mainly focused on the homeschooling nuts and bolts pieces of it, and not really where the wheels come off. And what you've probably seen and what I've seen over the years is that many families who struggle with that transition, and of course it's easy to kind of blame homeschooling, right? It's like, this homeschooling thing's not working. But it's usually not for a homeschooling reason why they're having the challenges. And that's what I found was lacking in the mentoring community, is that you have a lot of resources that can tell you how to do all the transcripts and the learning styles, and that's all in here too. But once you get beyond that, the wheels do come off when you have relationship issues at home, when you have parenting issues at home, behavioral issues, spiritual discipleship issues, just logistic issues of running the house, just those things. Scheduling, all of those things, that's really where people were having the struggle. And I didn't really find a tool or a resource out there that was really helping to answer those questions. So that's why
so now
this came about.
Yes, with all this COVID situation and the schools being challenging and having different situations that a lot of parents don't want their children to go back to. We have received calls and a lot of visits of parents that are deciding to homeschool. And a lot of them are coming and they're saying, I'm going to do it for 1 year. So we have talked a lot about the deschooling concept and the same thing about working on the relationships. And sure, academics are very important, but once you're going to get to academics, you have to get used to the whole new experience. And because the kids were already home, some of the parents already got a flavor of having them longer and having to adjust and personality conflicts, learning to a different management of time and so stuff like that. So why would you recommend for families like that? They're making that transition. It's all new and obviously they're eager and ready to homeschool and they want the best for their kids. But this is really different than what they have done before.
It's very different, and even the word homeschooling is it means very different things to different people. Quarantine schooling is not the same as traditional homeschooling per se, because in traditional homeschooling, the parents are deciding the curriculum. They're planning out what needs to happen from grade to grade to grade, from subject to subject, and that is different than what most parents were unfortunately thrust into a no choice situation where they're having to just help their children manage through the expectation from the school system. And I feel for them. It's a very, very tough, all of a sudden, transition that they've had to deal with. But like you said, it's interesting because people are questioning, well, gosh, it was a challenge, but yet they kind of tended to learn more in a much shorter devotion of time. Because they're realizing that so much of the traditional school setting, whether it's public or private or whatever, tends to center around things that are very time intensive and not necessarily value added, and busy work or things like that. But those parents that are seeking to do something a little bit different and also not wanting to be in a situation where they might start the school year again and then have to derail that, that this is something, the homeschooling process and even this kind of a tool is written to help those parents navigate those questions, and especially if they're a family of faith, it is very much these tools are very much designed to help families of faith navigate through how to apply the spiritual aspect of what they're trying to convey to their family and their children, along with the what, like the specifics. And that's very much the vein of how the Balanced Homeschooler came about, in helping them understand that all the homeschooling nuts and bolts, as well as, like you said, the relational things, and also, making sure that not only their own household finances, for instance, are in order, but how do they teach those principles to their children depending on what ages they are, right? What season they're in. Same thing with the relationship or the communication, challenges, because at the end of the day, homeschooling is a great magnifier for what already is going on in the home. And so when people are trying to decide, whether or not they're going to take on that responsibility, just to recognize that, it may feel more like a relief to have them away for the day and have somebody else doing the academic piece of it, and come home and maybe still have some challenges, but not be as intensive. That may feel better, but it doesn't solve the issue. And that's the thing that I've really found with homeschooling families over the years, who really do make the commitment, like you said, for if it's for a year or whatever it is, to say, we're going to really wholeheartedly look at what it takes to really do this ourselves, because what they start to see, and I had this exact situation to one of my good friends who was a fellow mentor, and they were in that exact situation. Their oldest son, they have 5 children now, but their oldest son was in a situation where he was really not just being bullied, but bullied by the teachers. Like, really, he thought very poorly of himself, and they were very, very concerned about him in a number of ways. And they came to me in a fall situation, like October-ish time frame, and I sat down with both mom and dad, and we had a heart-to-heart, and we spent a couple hours just going through and unpacking their concerns, and I just shared with them, here's some things that we can start with, and just you're going to take this day at a time, and recognize that he like you used the term de-school, right? He needs to have some time to create space between the negative experiences that student was experiencing to what can be possible in the home, and in that nurturing environment, and in that environment where you're really looking at each and every need that they have and addressing it specifically for them. And they wound up, by that spring, she had actually gone through the mentoring program with myself and a few other moms. And by that spring, they were like, this is no longer a one-year deal, because they realized towards the end of that spring, they're like, he has made so much progress, and he has got such self-confidence now that, why would we turn around and then put him back in that environment in the fall, just to go back through the cycle again. So that's what I see a lot, is that, parents do the due diligence of just seeing if they can make it work with their family dynamic, and then they realize that it winds up being something that really creates dividends beyond what they had hoped for. Yeah, and it's never perfect. No. So it's totally fine. People are gonna make mistakes. Kids, sometimes they will exceed, and oh my goodness, my kid is so at math, and it's like, oh my goodness, my kid's not reading, and that's totally fine, because those are things that you're gonna work on. And for us, the parents, it gets super stressful, because we want our kids to do well, and then we're starting internalizing it is us that is preventing this, but it is not, because you can actually work more at the pace of your child, focusing on their individual needs, and also sometimes giving them more time that they may need, for certain issues. Yeah, that customization that happens, it is a tutoring environment, and there's, so you have a student sometimes who, I've never met an average student, and so, you have some that just are really much more geared to the sciences or math, and they tend to work ahead, and then they might need some additional assistance in the writing, and sometimes they need something a little bit different. I know our oldest son, he excelled and had success with much more traditional type curriculum, and then there was almost a 4-year gap before the next son, and then his brother was a couple years after that. So the 2 younger ones, they didn't do as well with that same curriculum. And so it's kind of like when you buy those, genes or whatever, you think, oh, I can pass this down, and it's like it never works, because the seasons or the body shape is not different. It's like, okay, we have reused curriculum. There have been things that they've definitely all used, and it's been fine. But we've never chained ourselves to that idea, to feel like, okay, we're handcuffed to this curriculum just because we spent money on it before, because there was a different approach, like for instance with language arts, there was a different approach that our younger guys needed that was different, and part of that was because our younger guys did have more of a bit of a disruption in their schooling, because the year that this came came out in 2010, when an earlier version of this and the program came out, within just a few months, our oldest was diagnosed with leukemia when he was 12. Yeah. And that created a whole 25-month journey of living at the Children's Hospital here in Phoenix, in and out of clinics. Grandma was a great help during that time, and some other close homeschooling friends. And then we even had a 9-month period in there where we didn't even live in Arizona. Yeah. So we were in Seattle for 4 months trying to get a certain medical treatment there that never wound up coming to fruition. And then we were all on some medical trials and went to Bethesda, Maryland for another 4 months at the NIH there, and another 3-4 trials. And then we wound up at St. Jude for a while before coming back here. And so it's one of those things where we realized then more than ever, and of course during that time, you had all these grand plans of stuff you want to do, and you have to just kind of, stick to the bare bones, and and I will tell you during that season that and we've been through that was obviously the most challenging thing we've ever been through as humans and parents, but we've been through 2 major job losses over the years, death of my father, and then our oldest son did wind up passing away when he was 14 and a half, succumbed to the illness. But I will tell you that in the homeschooling journey, one of the things that was such a huge blessing to us, and there's too many to enumerate in this setting, but one of the things that was a huge blessing to us was the fact that homeschooling was the one thing that was under our control, that was something that could cater to us, that we could tell it what to do. Yeah. And it wasn't just for our son who was going through the leukemia. He kept up with his studies. He could do it when he was feeling well, and he really just, he never had issues keeping up because it was at his own pace in the first place. And the same thing with our younger guys. We adjusted and we did some things, so things were a little lighter those years, and then later on, like I said, we wound up adjusting some curriculum that was more fitting for them later on. But it was just one of those things where it really catered to what we needed at the time. Yes. I needed a certain delivery method in math for our older son by the time that we were in this situation where I couldn't always be with him. Exactly. Because my husband would work out of the hospital, and we'd trade off, and I'd go back in, and so I needed some things that were a little bit more independent. He could run it off a DVD or a CD, and just things like that, where to have that flexibility to where you feel like you weren't that this wasn't this was the one area in life where you weren't always being told what your limited choices were. And it was beautiful too, because we could be together, Janet. Absolutely. Because our guys could be with us, and because we saw the devastation. When another family, we'd be at a Ronald McDonald house, and you'd see one parent there with the sick child, and then the other parents at home trying to hold down a job, and the other kids are in school. And we are so grateful for that, because our sons and ourselves, we didn't have to give up a day with him. We were with each other the whole way, and we actually had, I'm getting goosebumps right now, because we actually had medical practitioners in the NIH, for example, that came to us towards the end of our stay there when we were going on to St. Jude next. And they said, we cannot tell you how much we have learned from your family, because this is unusual that you're all 5 here. Yeah. And we saw the dynamic of just you're just doing life, and just you're not home, but you're home because you're with each other. And we saw the positive things that did for our son and his health and his mental health. And so we pray along the way. We know we tried to make a difference wherever we went, and part of that was homeschooling. Part of that was the fact that we had invested in those relationships with our sons early on. There was a huge trust factor there, and there was a huge teamwork factor there, because his younger brothers were 6 and 8 when he was diagnosed, and that's not necessarily the most outward-looking, generous season of life. You're still kind of very much like, wait a minute, how does this affect me? Exactly. And they learned how to really understand how to be compassionate and how to be flexible. That was actually, for one of our sons, something that was very, very huge for him to learn how, because he was very much like, I do this at this time, and I do this. And so by doing life together and recognizing that when you homeschool and you're in it for the long haul, I mean, we're in it for decades. Absolutely. Decades. And there's bound to be things like this that come up, that life tragedy and death in the family and sickness and job loss, miscarriages, we've had that experience as well. And so that's the thing that I think is so lovely about
Absolutely.
the ability to homeschool, is that you can fit it in a way that serves the family, and it just becomes something that you have to like bow down to and make its own idol. It's something that serves the family.
That's right.
Whether that's the structure of what you're doing, the curriculum that you're choosing, the groups that you involve yourself with, and I think God really can speak through the people, you know, that are in your life. And so that's what excites me so much about just the idea of mentoring. And that's really what gave birth to the Balanced Homeschooler, was the fact that, you know, I felt like that the groups of ladies, they're so wonderful that I've met over the years, because that's the thing too, is you wind up connecting women with other women.
Yes.
I mean, I had a woman in my mentoring session one time who had at that time, this was maybe, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, she had been homeschooling for 20 years. She had 10 children. She had way more experience than any of the rest of us. And she's like, I just need this. I just need this time to come and learn some new ideas. And, you know, I've been doing certain ways for so long. And then the women learn from her. And so that's what I love as well, is just when you have a group of moms who have a mentoring spirit, who either are very teachable and want to learn, or they have some things that they still want to learn, but they also have a lot that they can give. You just, you know, it's basically what they wind up adding to it. And that's what I've tried to do, is not to tell people you need to do X, Y, and Z. It's that here's a structure, here's some things to consider, here's some questions to ask yourself. Because one way or another, we have to wrestle with these things. You know, we have to decide, what do we want our home to be? How do we want that environment to look? And how do we want our kids to interact with each other, as well as the world at large? I mean, that was one of the pleasures of when we were traveling around. We'd meet so many other families, and our sons would have compassion for, you know, the issues that they were going through. And then you'd have volunteers come in that you've made, and they'd be like, you know, you'd hear the comments from other families being like, wow, you know, your kid, my 7-year-old at the time, there was a police officer who had come to volunteer at an event, and he was so kind, and they were making snow cones, and he was going around and like selling all the free snow cones, like, hey, you know, everyone's really liking cherry, but I can get grape and this and that. He was so articulate and didn't have any problems talking to people. The donors and like people who were mixing with the patient families were getting such a kick out of him.
Oh, absolutely.
And he's like, so what college do you go to? And he goes, I don't go to college. I'm 7. I'm homeschooled.
They're so cute. So the mentoring that you were talking about can take places in different ways. Sometimes it's a little more formal, and a lot of times it's more informal. You know, just moms talking to each other, encouraging each other, helping each other. And so we mentioned deschooling also, especially now that so many families are going to be are starting to homeschool. You know, and relationships. That is so important. You know, just spending some time. Academics are important. So, but they can wait a month or however long while you just regroup, refigure things out, connect with other moms, you know, support groups. Oh my gosh, here in Arizona there's a lot of support groups that moms can join, and we always recommend that, because
for sure,
especially when you're getting started, you're so overwhelmed, and everything's so new and foreign, you know, so it's really good to have just people to cheer you on and to let you know what, I'm normal. I grew up in Peru, and I tell my kids how to read, you know, and you can do it. We can encourage each other, and we really can do it.
We can, I mean, if you can teach your child how to tie their shoes, you know, we stuck with Velcro as long as we could.
Yes.
Eventually, you have to teach them how to tie their shoes. And we can do it, and it's like, okay, teach them how to read. And one of my sons are doing driver's ed right now, and it's like, you know, it just comes full circle, because it's like every thing that comes up, or social situation they need to navigate, or whatever, it's like, okay, here's the next natural thing we're going to talk about, you know, learning how to do, and so I think one of the questions you were talking to me earlier about was what brought about the Balanced Homeschooler.
Exactly. This is the next book, The Balanced Homeschooler. So how did I give you the idea to write a separate book for high school students?
I did, because I realized, you know, when like I said, when my son was younger, when the Balanced Homeschooler came about, one of the things he said to me that's still a huge inspiration to me today, because before he became ill and everything, he was just so fascinated with, you know, all of this, and I said, you know, thank you for being patient, and I was taking like more than I thought, and he said to me, he says, no, I think it's great, and he goes, I want other people to have what we have. From the mouth of a 12-year-old boy. is still in my heart.
Yeah.
And so in that way, you know, to help families create the environment and ask the questions and tackle the relational, the spiritual, the financial, all those things, plus the schooling, that's one thing. But then I realized as the guys got older and they were entering the high school years, and Jonathan, for example, just graduated high school, and I have another one who's a senior in the fall. So we're at the end of our formal homeschooling time. But as they started to approach that, like in the junior high years, because that's really where when they start turning 12 and 13, your brain starts to click over to, okay, the rest of the horizon of what I'm looking at is the back side. It's the downhill slope of homeschooling.
Yes.
And what is that going to look like? And so I realized that the best thing that I could do was to look at a way to help not just mentor moms in the broader things, because this definitely covers, like the Balanced Homeschooler definitely covers like a ton of stuff all the way through from littles to high school. But I felt like the best service I could provide was for the high school journey, for the teenage years, was to give parents a tool that they could use to mentor their own teens. A spine, a tool, something, again, that prompts and asks questions and helps them to have conversation with their teens. And that's really where this was born.
Yeah, and this, even if this is a spine, it's going to work differently for every single family, because Evan wanted people to experience the love and the peace that you guys had in your family, and you know, even when you were disagreeing, there's probably a way that you guys figured that out, how to iron that out.
You kind of decide in advance. We know we're going to have disagreement. This is how we're going to resolve this. Is what's expected.
Yes. Yeah. So every family will look differently. You know, this is not creating a replica, but it's just figuring out that way that you can mingle. Like, first of all, my youngest daughter, she was actually in China and when all this wuha started. Well, all this coronavirus, I apologize. And the coronavirus. And she's living in my house now. And it wasn't intended. She just ended up having to leave China in the blink of an eye. So she and her husband living in my house. And it is so much fun having them. But there's certain things that we totally disagree about, especially in all these issues that are popping up right away. And it's actually really neat because we can totally disagree and even raise our voices, because I'm from Peru and we have hot blood. You know, we all have energy and so on. So our voices may get a little louder where maybe in your family they don't. But we still love each other.
Well, I don't know about that.
Well, maybe they do. Maybe they do, exactly. So each family will be different.
Right.
And it is really neat to be at the stage where we're sharing the same home. It's already been, I think, 4-5 months maybe. I can't believe it. We were just saying it's like a blink of an eye.
Right.
And but I think the foundation.
It's like March 101st, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh my goodness, yes. But I strongly believe what you were saying, that the foundation that we had through all those years, just growing together, learning to challenge each other, learning to give each other grace, learning to love each other.
Right.
Yes, academics was important, but learning to do life.
Yes.
And
if we can't do that within our own families, it's very, very difficult for them to translate that grace to other people they don't know at all.
Exactly.
And that's where you wind up with situations where people can't work together in groups, or they have antagonism in the workplace.
Exactly.
And that's really the thing, is, you know, you look forward to saying, you know, it's not just our nuclear family, but how we can help them successfully prepare to make those connections outside to all the other, you know, avenues that they're going to need to lock down.
Yes. So even when families are choosing curriculum here, you know, you're not going to find a curriculum that you're going to like. I mean, you might, but it's unlikely that you're going to like every single thing that the curriculum has. There'll be something that you don't like, and it's really good to be able to study it and tell your child, this curriculum is worthwhile, or whichever one we have here, and this little piece is not for our family, or we just disagree, and this is why we disagree. And then you move on, and that curriculum still is excellent, and it still is valid.
Right.
So this curriculum is not only for homeschoolers. I mean, I know you wrote high schooler, the Balanced High Schooler, not homeschooler.
Yes,
because
this one.
That one is homeschoolers. This one can be used by any family.
It really can.
Yes.
It really can. Obviously, it's, you know, the subtitle says Getting Parents on and Homeschool Teens on the Grid for college and beyond. And on the Grid is something that's in the book. That's kind of a fun tool that we use.
Yeah.
But the nice thing about this is the expanse of it is not just academic. And the goal of this is that you're mentoring your team to start thinking along the lines of things that they will eventually need to take responsibility for. And also, the more that you involve your team in the decision making of things that you're going to be doing in that season, the more successful the buy-in and the participation is going to be. And again, it's a 2-for-1, right? Because you're going through the process and making decisions and doing all the things, but you're also in a situation to where you're mentoring them on how to make those choices, because by the time they leave your home, you don't want them to be paralyzed in making their own decisions or thinking that mom and dad have to clear everything. You know, you want them to be equipped,
absolutely,
to have thought through these things, and even if not everything is perfect, that they understand. Okay, I have a thing I'm working on here. I have a plan here. I know what my direction is there.
Absolutely. So I had a mom that came, and she wasn't planning on homeschooling. She just wanted some help. Her kid was going to be going to a school, and I showed her this, and she was so excited. So it's very interesting. Parents that are not even wanting to homeschool, but they want to be invested in the life of their children. They can also learn a lot from homeschoolers. So it's really neat. So you also think it's important. You mentioned in this book that you want your children to also learn about their love languages. I actually like that, because I didn't think about that, but I have been noticing. My daughters are both married, and it's really neat to say, that's the love language of my son-in-law. This is the love language of my other son-in-law. It's very neat to see that.
Yep, I have actually a blog, or very early on. I think it's still on there. You go way back to 2010 on my site, and that was one of the first subjects I tackled on there. Was I looked and I was observing, because my kids were pretty young at the time, trying to figure out their love languages. And to this day, those assessments and observations are correct.
Oh, how funny.
All these years later, 10 years later. And they're all different, all three guys, and my husband and I even. So we have like all the love languages going on, and of course you have like a primary and a secondary. And so that's just one example of a conversation. And again, it's not like I certainly did not create the concept of love languages, so I don't want that to be misunderstood. So we go to the resources of those folks who are already really versed in those areas, and we just encourage them to say, look at this tool, have this conversation, determine what this is, because it's not just benefiting, for instance, the teen to know their own, because of how they will naturally interact with people and how they best receive love, for example. Same thing with personality styles or leadership styles. But it's also for them to be able to discern it in other people, so that they can speak more effectively in their language. Whether they're dealing in a like a sporting team situation, or eventually like group projects in college or work environment or whatever. To be able to discern that and to care about that is something that we want to be intentional about teaching our kids to look for those things. Because left to ourselves, we usually just look at ourselves. We don't look outside of that. And so the process of going through this is similar with this program. This program here is designed to help the parents to work with their team to help to sculpt what their team's vision is over time. And so it's a process to where they go through and they look at identifying what their passions are, what their love languages are, what their communication preferences are. There are some teens that are going to be more naturally inclined to work well with information versus people. Like there's preferences that way. And there's also hobbies and interests and things that are sometimes different than what their vocation might eventually be. But what I'll give you a little freebie here. So what we found is that the hobbies can often indicate an industry that a person wants to operate or work within, or a space that they want to be within, versus maybe necessarily what their degree will be in. And I'll give you a great example. Because my 18-year-old, he's going into a business analytics program, and he wants to follow that with getting a master's in project management. But he also has a strong background in the arts and in theater and in music. And so he wants to apply those in industry, those value-add industry, skills in an entertainment industry environment. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So in other words, as parents, another great example is sports medicine or business management in the sports arena. So most of us are not going to have kids who go on to be professional sports people, right? That's a very, very tiny, even in the college arena, that's super tiny. But we have a lot of young people who are super interested in sports.
Absolutely.
That's another great example where that person could be a nutritionist, or they could go into sports management, or from the business side, or they could be a coach or whatever, and they work in that space, even if they themselves are not the quote talent so per se. They have a different talent to offer, right? So having those conversations and being able to broaden, versus that age-old question, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's such a limiting, intimidating question that this is the kind of thing that helps us to help our teens build their own personal vision. So by the time they leave our homes, they have a very clear idea of who they are and how God has equipped them to where they're going in their spiritual giftedness and all these other areas that it addresses as well.
Yeah. So that was the next thing I was going to mention or ask you about. So this book, it always starts with a Bible verse for each chapter, and it's you call it a 40-day journey.
Yes.
So it is very intertwined with the Christian faith all through it.
It is. It is. I didn't start out for it to be a 40-day structure. It just kind of was organic. It truly was. I kind of got up to that. I'm like, okay, gosh, I'm getting next to 40 elements here. And so what's nice is it's scalable and flexible. So if parents want to literally work through it in 40 days, they can. If they want to spread it out over a semester or a school year, or I think one of the better applications is to do it over a summer.
Yeah, that'd be
kind
really
of a nice summer thing.
Yes.
And so, but the point is there are 40 elements, and I felt like God was leading it that direction because it's super fitting. Like if you think about so many of the transformational things that happen in Scripture. Happened in 40 days.
Yes.
Right? The 40 days of the flood and 40 days for Pentecost and, just like all these different 40-day, events that were transformational in some way. And I thought well, that's kind of fitting because that's really what we're trying to do is to help to transform, not necessarily that we're trying to transform our teens, but we're trying to transform the way we understand our teens and the way they understand themselves so that they can then make the most of what God has equipped them to do. And so, yes, every one of those starts with a scripture because I and the same thing with this one as well. All 10 units are all intertwined with scripture because my feeling is that if it's an area that is worth investing in, if I can't tie it back to God's word, then I don't need to address it or deal with it. If it doesn't have. And so, for example, even like the academic piece, because we do encourage. After there's a process of going through and identifying personality preferences and spiritual gifts and helping them create their own personal testimony. We have like 3 units on helping them get to the point where they can articulate why they believe what they believe, which is great. So after you do all of that, you do get to the point where you're helping incorporate them into the planning for the academics and the electives that they're going to do in high school. And so to be able to allow them to do that also allows them to invest in the why. And so if you have a teen, for example, I was thinking here which day it is, but it's day 16. When you plan the core class of language arts, you might have a student who's more science and math oriented, and that's writing's not so much of a thing. So why do I have to do this? Because I don't want to do this in life. And so it goes through the discussion of how to have that discussion with each other and the scripture that relates to that. Because, for example, in that case, no matter what you do in life, God wants us to be good communicators.
Exactly.
We need to be able to be communicators who are not only in what we're saying, but in how we're saying it, because that lends credibility to what you're saying. If it's like riddled with all kinds of mechanical issues and stuff, people will dismiss you out of hand.
Exactly.
And so even something that's just a simple example, but basically the way that the book is structured is they're very digestible, probably an average of 3 to 4 or 5 pages at the most, a topic a day per se, a day. And it is a discussion that the parent and teen can go through together with the reading, and then there's a suggested written exercise, and a suggested discussion and suggested prayer for each one. And so, and I've had actually families ask me, do I need to have one of these for every student? And you don't. You can just use one as a spine, because really I suggest when you go through the exercises that they're keeping their own separate journal or typing it up or however they prefer to keep that going. But basically that it is a discussion starter for every one of these topics, and helps them to flow that through to the very end, which the goal again is helping them create their vision statement and their plan. It is very, very in tune with the college-bound student, but it also can be used with any student if they're going into the military, going to vocational school, going right in the workplace. any of those things can come out of this.
I liked that a lot because kids will do different things, and obviously this day and age most kids go to college, but that doesn't mean college is where everyone should go.
Right, and some want to enter the workforce directly, and then just take some night courses, until they kind of figure that out. So it's not just for college-bound teens.
Well, thank you, Carol, for being with us. So we have started what we're calling curriculum highlights, and we decided to do the first one with you because we are friends.
I feel so honored.
That's right, because we know each other and we're friends, and you're local too. So we're
I'm local.
So we have Nat Grass lined up. We have our Learning Language Arts for Literature, which is right here. We'll be doing them after our break and not Christmas, 4th of July. Too much has been going on.
Christmas in July, maybe.
Christmas in July, that's right. Anyway, and then we also are becoming distributors of Right Shop. I'm so excited.
Oh yeah, it's a great program.
Yeah, you guys cannot see, thank goodness, but we have emptied a bunch of space right here, and this is where Right Shop is gonna come in. I kind of got scared when I came in. I was like, oh my goodness, I already emptied the shelves. We cannot sit in front of that side. It looks empty. Yep. So we are making room for new stuff, and I do have a little surprise. There's another distributor, another vendor. It's a math curriculum. That's all I will say, that we're in the process of having available here. We get asked about that all the time, so I
can guess, but I'm not going to say.
Don't say it yet because we're still working on it, but I am super excited.
That's great.
So I think new homeschooling families and veteran homeschooling families are going to be so excited at, in addition to everything that we have here, that we have more curriculum to talk about in person, and also our curriculum highlights. So the idea of the curriculum highlights is during 1 week, we're open Tuesday through Fridays. Tuesdays we'll do as much as possible on Tuesdays. If our guests are not able to do on Tuesday, we'll do on a different day. So that will be a Facebook Live similar to what we did, learning about the curriculum and the author, our famous person here. Yay. Oops, sorry, I will not damage the book. And then you have sent us 3 links. So we're posting curriculum tips. So Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, each day, we will post on our Facebook page a curriculum tip from Carol. And then Carol also brought an extra book that we can give away.
Yeah, I thought however you want to facilitate this with your Facebook Live community.
Yes.
I don't know how you want to do that, but basically this would be there for them as a giveaway from just
you know how we're going to do it, because we actually didn't have time to iron this out. It all happened too fast. So I'm thinking what we should do is have families just post your questions for Carol in the messages today, tomorrow, today, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
Yeah, just the different postings that are going out.
Yes, right. Questions, comments, anything. If you have done Carol's workshop before from the Balanced Homeschooler, make a comment how that helped you. Or if you have heard her, because you've been a speaker at the AFI convention.
Yes, I've done just different events over the years, so yeah.
Yeah, or if you have read the book, or if you simply have questions, if you are one of those families that's starting to homeschool, here at Covenant, we like to say we take the scary out of homeschooling, because we really do. People come like this, and then they go like, I can do it. And Carol does the same in different ways. So we want to help you. We are here for you guys. We'll help you to get started, and even to get encouraged, because even sometimes after we've been going, you just get discouraged sometimes.
Or you just get in a rut on things, and you kind of, and that's one of the things, I have one of the things that is on my Facebook page. I'm going to be doing a kind of a focus on rebooting, and because that's basically the thing that winds up happening at some point.
Absolutely.
People feel like they need to just reboot.
Exactly. So this book here is for free, and so we will do a drawing, and we will mail it to you. Unless you want to come and visit us, then you can come and pick it up then. And we have several of them here also that people can buy at Covenant. We have them all the time. We have them in stock, and you priced them so reasonably. They're priced at $15, so $14.99.
And what's great is that you can cycle through this multiple times over the years. So because when they're younger, you kind of get different experiences than when they're in the middle or older side of their teenage journey. So that's what I like too. Is it has that kind of renewability to it. So that one is also, and that you definitely have them here, which is great because you can come and look at them.
Totally. People love looking at them.
On Amazon as well. And same thing for this one. She actually has a sample copy that I'm holding it right here that she keeps here if you want to come in and look at this one. If you think you might want to have a little bit more assistance sense or understanding for the overall homeschooling journey, that's a great option to come in here and take a peek at that.
Yeah.
And that's available on Amazon as well. This one's $30 on Amazon, so it's pretty reasonable.
Are you still doing online workshops for this curriculum or not anymore?
I am doing it more based on interest, and so like I'm doing a Facebook Live in July.
Okay, very good.
So you can get details on that on my Facebook page.
That's right.
And then in the fall, like usually what I do is I try to have some sessions available in the fall and the spring. Sometimes over the summer, although this summer we haven't because of all the crazy going on.
Yes.
But yes, we started doing virtual mentoring before it was a thing.
Yeah.
Because it's just hard to coordinate schedules,
Exactly.
and if your husband's out of town and you have a sick child or whatever, and you just want to join. I had a woman who was able to join. She was like chronically ill all the time, so she really needed the support, but she couldn't be out in public. And obviously in the season of COVID, it's a perfect solution.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we definitely do the workshops, and in fact, that'll be one of the deals that you'll put out this week. I won't spoil it, but one of the deals you'll put out this week has to do with getting some additional support from me one-on-one. And but yeah, if you're interested, let me know, and I can give you what the plans are going to be for the fall, to have a little bit of a. What I do is I have an open time and it's just people who have invested in the program. So what's great is you're in there with all the people who have all the same context and understand what you're talking about.
Well,
so,
thank you, Carol,
for
coming and being with us.
Yes, thank you for inviting me.
And make sure you guys tune in for our next curriculum highlight. See you guys soon.
Bye.